You might say I'm wrong, but I'm going to go out on a limb about this. Every great drummer has faced this same thing. I don't think you get great without it. I call it the cave. And the movie Whiplash immortalized it. And yes, that movie is full of unrealistic things. But it did capture the cave, the crucible you have to go through. And if you clicked on this video, it might be because you want to know more about this. Like, is this true? Is this something I'll have to face someday? And it's not this angry inexperience for everyone, but I also don't think it's possible without some frustration. Try one more time. It goes something like this. You start out playing drums and have some success and find it fun. At some point, some players decide they want to be as good as they can be. They want to turn pro. At some point after that, they realize how high they have to climb, how big the distance is from where they are to greatness. And they either rise to the challenge or they don't. Because it's scary, for some players. Some people get there more accidentally. For them, it's like they just love to climb every day, and one day they look up and realize they've accidentally climbed Everest. That's real. But we'll unpack all of that. And I'll give you my perspective as a drummer who's had these periods, whether you think I turned out any good or not. Oh, I'm Nate, and people call me the 80/20 drummer. Anyway, today on the channel, the cave, what we mean by it, the different ways it can manifest depending on the drummer, and what it means to you, dear viewer. If you want to be great, or if you just want to enjoy the drums, play in a band, and keep putting in PRs. Either way, stay tuned. And folks, this video is brought to you by me, the 80/20 drummer. Throughout this video, this is another groove one. I'm going to be playing a few different grooves, and I'm going to try to innovate some stuff, some things maybe you haven't heard. If you'd like free transcriptions of all the grooves I play, you have but to click the link below the player and tell us where to send it. With that, on with the rest of the video. Let's first talk about what I mean by the cave and how it's different from regular practice. There are things you absorb generally just by playing music, and there are things you only absorb with really focused practice. I'm showing you Tony Williams right now to avoid any old versus new drummer controversy. But here's a modern example. There's no way to get hands like this without a ton of specific practice. Or take JoJo. You don't just stumble over this style. It takes years of focus. Regular practice might be going over a few things each session, exploring your creativity. But the cave is going really deep on one thing. The ride cymbal, single strokes, the hi-hat foot. It's like getting an undergrad degree in just one thing. And by the time you're done, you have something unfakeable. Whether that's playing with a metronome on offbeats or 5 notes on the ride cymbal. Finally, I call it the cave because it's a metaphor for isolating and going deep on something. For Sonny Rollins, it was a bridge. For Coltrane, a bedroom. For podcast guest Richie Martinez, it was a living room with his daughter on his lap. Cool. Now let's talk about the types of caves. Cave 1, the Rage Cave. Archetype, Andrew Neiman. The Rage Cave gets its name because it's born out of a realization that you're not where you want to be, and you need some focused effort to close the gap. It doesn't necessarily mean you have a frustrated energy, but it does differ from some of the other caves in that you get a rude awakening of a gap, and you have an emotional reaction that makes you want to close it. I don't want to say it's 100% Inigo Montoya, but if you've been in this cave, you recognize that energy.
You killed my father. Prepare to die.
Podcast guest Forrest Rice realized after the Guitar Center Drum-Up finals just how high the bar he wanted to reach was, so he got super specific and spent way more hours in the shed.
For me, this is kind of when everything really starts, is around this time, because I start shedding with Andy, and down the street from me is this amazing musician at the time. I don't know if he's still out in Rancho. His name's Quentin Ferb, and he's a phenomenal drummer and keyboard player. I brought him out and we started shedding, and and then I just started, I knew I had a couple months to shed and try to get better, and then I had the actual drum off.
Podcast guest Cami Keys was partly fueled by a sense of feeling left out as a little girl in church, and that inspired her to go super deep with her study.
I wanted to play in church, 5-year-old little Cami, and they were just like, nah. And so almost kind of being rejected from the church as a drummer, and then being like, all right, I'm going to go the academic route. I'm going to go this way and I'm going to go to the military. That's not the story for a lot of other drummers. And so that's kind of what it's been for me.
And podcast guest Thomas Pridgen has unabashedly used rage as fuel to build his current skill level and stay sharp.
Majority of us had to fight to play. You know what I mean? So it's like we play all that stuff, all them chops. Like, dude, I was good before I was ever in the Mars Volta, but magazines didn't give a shit. I've been endorsed with Zildjian since I was 10. I was with DW since I was 17, bro.
And I'm not claiming to be great, but this is a cave I'm very familiar with. A lot of my biggest jumps are fueled either by haters or by hearing myself on recordings and discovering I wasn't where I'd hoped. In the early 20-teens, I discovered YouTube and social media, and all of a sudden I could see in detail, in high resolution, just how much higher the level was than where I was at the time. The good first 3 years of my channel were fueled to a large degree by rage that I couldn't do what these other drummers could. About once a year, I have a rage fit and make a jump. Semi-recently, it's been playing the hats with the left foot, and subdivision precision when I improvise. But Nate, I can hear you saying, are you saying that all good drummers are fueled by rage? Well, first, I'm not claiming that I'm any good. But second, no. There's another completely different archetype. The love-fueled cave. The love cave for short. Cave 2. The Love Cave. Nobody typifies this more than 3 recent podcast guests. Chris Turner, Matt in Class, and Nathan Shingler. Chris Turner of, well, Chris Turner fame, describes his journey as literally falling in love anew with the drums each day.
It's a very natural motivation that I have. I have a lot of students ask me, they're like, how many hours a week should I be practicing? How, what sort of regime should I follow? And I've never had one. I've never done that because I'm just naturally excited.
Matt in Class describes a situation that seems like she put in a great deal of work and had her challenges, but it's one nonetheless primarily fueled by creativity.
Because I was like, I want to do everything. I love everything. I love prog rock, indie rock. I love, just every genre that I can be a part of, especially when the people are good. So it is very hard to say no to things, especially for me.
Likewise, Nathan Shingler, in this yet-to-be-published episode, seems primarily creativity-fueled.
So I went through these couple months of chilling out a little bit and really finding my voice and my my flow state properly. And then playing Alpha's music allowed me to kind of really explore that. So it was just a super good maturing process.
So, what separates these guys from the Rage Cave? For some people, it's obvious. Chris Turner never felt angry because there was some ability gap he needed to close. He just followed his bliss. But with others, there's definitely a mix of motivations. It feels like people like Madden and Nathan never really found their playing lacking compared to something extrinsic they identified. Rather, they were fueled by the pleasure of exploring their internal creativity and measuring up to their internal bars. Before we draw some more conclusions, one more cave I want to talk about. Cave 3, the Discipline Cave. I think of this one a little like the Rage Cave, minus the emotion. There's still a gap people are identifying, but rather than stewing about it, they calmly identify the steps they need to take in order to get there and follow them. Podcast guest Annika Niles exemplifies this approach. Describing her experience in college, Annika talks about seeing where she wanted to go and matter-of-factly mapping out how she would get there.
I think nowadays it's well balanced. I have my hand out, so I usually prepare, each year I prepare, each 1.5 years, it's I update my handout, so it's a handout of 80 pages, which I just built myself out of things I got, ideas on the drums while playing, so I write this roughly down, and at some point I make it a proper PDF.
In a similar vein, Zeke the Freak Wyatt describes arriving at Berklee and identifying a gap to where he wanted to be, then was super systematic and motivated, but not in a way that struck me as rage.
I wasn't really all of that, bro. I got to Berklee in 2019, and I had never been in a shed before, ever in my life. And I'm sitting down with some guys that really, really do this. I ran into some people that really did it. And, just being, not good pushed me to be like, yo, I got to figure this out. Like now I'm a very determined person. So I was like, I got to figure this out. And, you know, the curriculum at Berklee is not necessarily teaching you how to chop and articulate and do that. It's not necessarily that. The things they teach you can help you with that, but it's not all around that. So I had to take time to figure that out myself.
And probably the archetype that comes to mind when we think about discipline, more than any other, is Stan Bicknell. Stan matter-of-factly journaled about what he needed to accomplish and was like a machine, in a good way, running through those steps, modifying them, running through them again.
So I'm quite happy to sit down I've got a 2-hour routine at the moment that I've just written recently that's broken into 4 30-minute windows, and they're very, very specific about what I'm hitting at each point. I've divided things up into minutes for the category, blah, blah, blah.
Okay, but what does this mean to you? Do I need to go into a cave, Nate? More to the point, if I've never felt rage or practiced till my hands bled, does that mean I won't be great? It depends on your goals. If you think of the Love Cave people as loving the drums so much that greatness was a side effect, and the Rage Cave people as using the goal to fuel their practice, the common denominator is one thing, a focused effort. And I do think that's important if you want to get to be a Tony Williams or a Vinny. You don't get hands like this without a lot of specific reps, without a cave. But what about if you want to be Ringo, or Charlie Watts, or Patrick Carney? In that case, you might need something different. It might be a bunch of reps writing and rehearsing and playing with a band. And what if you want to get to a place where playing the drums feels good and you can continue learning at your own pace? Or you pass the stage where it's constant frustration? Well, in my humble opinion, to get there, you're still going to have to push through some hard stuff. And it's going to be tempting to quit when it gets hard. And it's going to be confusing knowing what to work on. And what to keep working on even though it sucks, and what to quit working on. And sales pitch, it's that specific stage that I help my coaching students through. For more info on that, just join my mailing list at the link below, the same link where you get the Groove transcriptions. But basic thesis, it's pretty impossible to get good at the drums without some period of pushing through. And sometimes you're lucky enough to have love to fuel you and a lot of spare time. And sometimes you're not. Okay, so we've covered stuff like blazing singles and whatever Alex Cohen is doing. But what about more subtle stuff? And I'm going to go outside drums for a second, but what about Brad Mehldau? He does this thing a lot of the audience probably doesn't even realize, where he trades solo voices from the soprano voices in his right hand to the tenor voice in the thumb and index finger of the left hand. Or Mark Guiliana's recent arc. This is almost the musical equivalent to the probably apocryphal story about Steve Jobs, where it was said he liked to use expensive aluminum parts and parts of the computer that people wouldn't even see. In other words, are caves in play when musicians put in a ton of reps on things that not only won't probably impress audiences, but many audiences won't even be aware of them. My hunch? This is a function of love caves, of an intrinsic love for the craft that goes beyond just how you compare to others. Although, people have probably even seen some of the subtle Mehldau stuff, and rage caved that they couldn't do it. So gray areas, you guys. All that tracks with another loose theory I've got. The most innovative drummers, the people who change the game, your Chris Daves, your Nash Heatwaights, your Marcus Gilmores, your JD Becks, the people other people imitate, seem to disproportionately fall on the love cave side. They seem to spend less time comparing themselves to others, unless it's really old influences, and relatively more time going deeper into stuff that's just intrinsically interesting to them. All of which brings me to my final 2 points. First, very few people are entirely one type. Most people probably have a combination. I have little doubt that Thomas Pridgeon was motivated by love of developing the craft and his voice at multiple points, just for instance. And that means maybe we can choose the cave we enter, at least to a small degree. I actually put this to Madden.
And then a kind of confidence and discipline that keeps you focused on going really, really deep on a few things and going into your own voice rather than getting distracted. So it's very, very cool to hear.
Right now, I just love a good studio sound. I love a good sounding kit. I love a kit that is singing. And I just like playing to the music that I love. So it's not really too hard to like stay on my own path.
And I think we can do the same thing. I've definitely had points in my life where I felt the choice between following some thread that was interesting to me or doing that thing in that saved Instagram clip. And I'm not saying chasing the rage is always wrong, but maybe knowing the landscape of possible ways to end up and feeling like we have the power to choose is helpful.
And that's how you get the gig.
At any rate, hope you guys enjoyed this one. Am I onto something with this caves thing? Have you experienced a cave yourself? Leave a comment below. And just a reminder that if you'd like a completely free transcription of all the grooves I play in this video, and to be on my mailing list, which is awesome, where you get the lesson of the week early and the podcast early, and they're the only people to hear about my coaching openings, if that's something that's interesting to you, you'll want to click the link below the player and tell us where to send it on the next page. Dudes, it's been real. Always enjoy these. See you again real soon in another lesson of the week.